Welcome to Own It, the real truth about finding, starting, and running your own business or franchise. My name is Page Nicol with FranNet, and thank you for joining us for this next episode of Own It. And on today's episode, we're going to talk about service franchises. And we're going to talk about the pros, the cons, examples of what service franchises are, and why a majority of the people I've been working with over the last several decades are choosing service businesses over traditional retail. So oftentimes when I talk to people that are somewhat new to franchising, or if I ask them, what franchises come to mind, most of the people I talk to say, oh, they can think about a retail business like a UPS store, or they can think about a fast food business like McDonald's, or maybe a hair cutting business like a Great Clips or something like that. And the reason why we know is we go to those businesses on a regular basis, and they're pretty well known to be franchise operations. And those are great businesses, and I've owned many of those myself. Having said that, a lot of people come to me and they say, well, what about other types of businesses? Do I have to do something in fast food? Do I have to do something that's retail based? And I tell them, absolutely not. There are over 4,000 different franchises out there, and I work with about 400 of those. And I will tell people the majority of companies I work with are service based, meaning they don't have a specific location, especially not in a retail type environment or some kind of pad like you would see for a McDonald's or something like that. So service businesses have several advantages. One of the big advantages is not having a location. When you're running a service business, you might be running it from your home, which gives you a lot of advantages in terms of freedom and flexibility. And if you have other things going on, like family or consulting businesses or things like that, it gives you the opportunity to do that. In other words, you don't have to get up and drive to a location to run the business. Secondly, one of the other big advantages is cost. So when you think about a retail business, let's say a UPS store, and I built 65 UPS stores in San Diego, so I'm very familiar with this. You're probably talking about an investment of about $400,000 to $500,000. And so when you look at where that money's going, a lot of that money's going into construction. It's going into what we would call tenant improvements. It's going into fixturization, possibly equipment, decoration, things of that nature. So they tend to be more expensive to start. And from an operational standpoint, you have a lease payment and more overhead. So one of the disadvantages, or one of the two disadvantages to retail businesses, is that they're far more expensive to start up, and they're generally more expensive to run and operate. Another thing that people don't realize about retail businesses is once you decide to buy whatever franchise it is, let's say it's a UPS store or a Great Clips or a Stretch Lab or something like that, you don't open right away. In fact, many franchisors will tell you it may take you 6 or 12 months to find a site and build out that location. So you also have to be prepared for that lengthy period of time between when you decide to go into business for yourself and you purchase this franchise to when you're actually opening. So another advantage of a service business is once you make the decision to move forward, you still have to go through training, and there's some onboarding that has to be done, but sometimes you can be in business in less than 6 months. Also, they tend to ramp up more quickly because you don't have the high overhead. You're not dealing with equipment leases. You're not dealing with expensive leases and things like that. So it gives you the opportunity to have lower expenses that, if it's a good business and you're running it properly, can ramp up more quickly. So people then ask me, well, they said, well, how much are these service businesses generally? And I said, well, they can be as low as $75,000 on upwards of maybe $275,000. Generally, when we're seeing these service businesses in the, 150 to 250 range, oftentimes there's something else that's added to the purchase. So it might be trucks or vehicles or things like storage facility or a warehouse or something like that, or you have to have specialized equipment. So that generally brings up the cost of the service business. But generally, when you're looking at, let's say, getting a fleet of vehicles or something like that, those things are generally leasable. So overall, the investment to start some of these service businesses can be relatively low. So the advantages I often tell people about a service business over, say, a retail business, as we talked about, they're less expensive to start up. You can get in business much more quickly. Generally, your overhead is lower, which means you can get to break even and profitability more quickly. So, one of the things you have to do when you're looking at any service business is you have to talk to the franchise owners and see what their experience is. How long did it take them to break even? How much money are they making? How many hours a day are they putting into the business? What were their startup costs? Those types of things. So, that's very, very important. So, when people come to me, they say, well, I don't know what service businesses are. Give me some idea what they might be. So many of the franchise service businesses I work with cover a very wide scale. So we might look at, say, a senior care business where you're providing in-home senior care through care providers to people in their home. You might be interested in home improvement or home repairs. So again, you're running this business from home and you're sending out technicians to do those home improvement or those home repairs. And that can be anything from kitchen remodeling, bathroom remodeling. It could be roofing. It could be installing HVAC units. It could be holiday lighting. There's all kinds of service businesses that provide all kinds of things that people need for their homes. And then we also look at what we call business to business concepts. So there are janitorial businesses that go into commercial properties and help them with their janitorial needs. There are companies that go out and stripe parking lots. If you go into, a big grocery store, shopping center, or a Walmart, or any kind of business or office park, they're striping. So someone has to go in and do that. People have to repair those parking lots. Also, there are service businesses that are what I call consultative in nature. So maybe you're a white collar executive and you see yourself doing some kind of consulting or coaching or something like that. So there are expense reduction franchises. There are small business coaching and mentoring franchises. There are all kinds of things in the white collar executive model. The other thing people often ask is, well, how much money can I make? Can I make more money if I buy a $500,000 retail business than if I buy a $100,000 service business? And I tell them one thing, there is no correlation with what you invest in a franchise and what you get back. So as you're going out and talking to owners of these service businesses and, some of the investments they put in are $150,000, you're going to find people that own these businesses that are very successful and making quite a bit of money. Many of my clients are surprised when they hear what the average unit volumes are of these businesses, what the net margins of these businesses are, and what these franchise owners are actually making. In many cases, we find these service businesses can oftentimes be more profitable than a retail business. Now, when we're looking at cons of service businesses, here's a few things I tell people. First of all, most service businesses are designed to have an owner operator running it full time. So what do I mean by that? So let's say you got into a senior care business and you're providing in-home senior care assistance. This is not the type of business where you would go out and hire a manager or a general manager to run the business, at least not initially. Really, the owner needs to be in there learning the business, learning how to manage the employees, learning how to get customers, learning how to do customer service, those types of things. So I would generally say that service businesses are not designed for someone who only wants to put in 10 or 15 hours a week. Now, retail businesses, on the other hand, and I've owned several of these, yes, those oftentimes can be run by a manager. So if you go into a UPS store or a Great Clips or anything like that and say, hey, as the owner here, 9 times out of 10, the owner is not going to be there. They're going to have a manager or a GM running that business for them. And that gives them the opportunity to scale and build multiple units. But I would say generally service businesses are also scalable, but you don't necessarily need multiple units. Sometimes you just need a larger territory. So it might be a city, it might be a county. In some cases, it might be the entire state. So oftentimes you'll see with service businesses, they can be scaled through having bigger territories. So the other things I tell people about service businesses is you need to believe in the service or the product. So when I owned my UPS stores, yes, I believed in the service. When I owned my Stretch Lab one-on-one assisted stretching franchise, yes, I believed in the service. So I thought it was very important. But I think it's even more important when you're running this service business full time. It doesn't necessarily need to be your life's passion, but if you're providing in-home senior care, you have to believe you're providing an essential service that seniors need and families need. If you're going out and doing some kind of home improvement, you need to be someone that says, I like doing home improvement. I believe that there are people out there that like this service. You don't necessarily need to be an interior decorator. You don't need to be a contractor. You don't need to be a window washer. Those things are not necessary, but you need to feel that the service or product you're providing is essential, it's necessary, and it's adding benefit. So that's very, very important. Now, I will say many of my clients, when they start these service businesses, they may run it themselves for 1, 2, 3 years. And then they'll start pulling back from the business, meaning that they will get a staff in place, maybe a sales manager in place, maybe a general manager in place running the business. I still tell my clients they should have their thumb on the pulse of the business on a regular basis, but necessarily they don't have to work those, 40 or 50-hour weeks. So when I'm sitting down with clients, the things that I'm generally asking them are, first of all, what's your investment level? What's your comfort level? If you're saying, hey, I have, access to maybe $50,000, maybe $100,000, but that's really where I'm comfortable, we're probably going to look at a service business. If we're going to look at a retail business, then now we're talking three, four, $500,000, and in many cases, we're probably going to have to get financing for that. The next thing I'll ask my clients is this something you can do full time? If they say, no, I'm working a corporate job and I only have about 10 or 15 hours a week, then usually I'll say, well, then we probably ought to look at more retail concepts than service concepts. On the flip side, if they say, no, I can do this full time, or my spouse can do it full time, or me and my spouse can do it full time combined, then yeah, we can definitely look at service businesses. The other thing is, how quickly do you want to be in business? Are you comfortable waiting 6 or 12 months to get your location open? If not, then we probably don't want to look at retail concepts. Also, in terms of ramp up, how quickly do you need the business to break even? And when do you need it to be profitable? So if people come to me and they say, well, I really need something that's going to start producing income in that first year, that's fine. We can start looking at businesses that can accomplish that. But having said that, you're probably going to be at least a year before you open your retail business. And obviously, most businesses don't break even on day one. You have to build the business. So service businesses sometimes can be beneficial to those that need to get to an income stream a little bit more quickly. And then one of the things I do with my clients is, well, let's look at what you're good at. Let's look at your skill sets. Let's look at the type of employees you want to work with. Let's look at things that you're excited about. Let's look at your market, maybe what's needed, what's essential out there. Those things are going to be very, very important. And that's where I guide people to find of those 400 companies I work with. If we're looking at service concepts, which ones are going to be the right fit? So one of the realities I tell people is service businesses can be a great way to go into business for yourself. The thing is you probably won't recognize a lot of the companies that I work with in the service sector because you may not use their service yet. But usually once I tell people what the industry is, what the company does, and so forth, they'll say, oh, okay, yeah, I've seen some of those out there, or I use that service myself, but I never really realized that it was a franchise concept. So if you'd like to learn more about service businesses, if you'd like to see if there are service concepts out there that fit what you're trying to do, your financial goals, your personal goals, or maybe your work-life balance goals, I'd be happy to help you with that. Again, my name is Page Nicol with FranNet. and I'd be happy to help you with any questions you might have about this or anything else related to business ownership or franchising. So thank you for joining me for this episode of Own It. After this episode, you will see my contact information, and please feel free just to reach out to me, have a phone call, and we can have a little bit of a discussion about how I might be able to help. Thank you. Have a great day.